Before we begin, just a quick note. The views and opinions shared by our guests on the Prison Pharmacy Connect show are entirely their own. We're simply providing a platform for open conversation, and nothing discussed should be taken as legal, medical, or professional advice. Today, we have Paul Kirby, who I had the pleasure of meeting only about a year ago, and since then we've connected really, really well. Paul, I'm going to leave it up to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Paul Kirby, the BSL user. Yes, I've got the voice, but my voice is because I was born hearing, but I was born to a deaf family. So my mum, my dad, brother, auntie, uncle. In the family, BSL user. Yes, we met about a year ago, and how our philosophy and how our passion to make things accessible is rich. So I look forward to this conversation.
I suppose some of the things I want to really ask and know more about is, as a user of BSL, what's your experience been like with healthcare, with pharmacy? Because speaking to you, it really got me thinking, actually, I've never come across a deaf person in prison. I have in community pharmacy, and the individual did not have hearing aids, but he would still talk and try and voice across what he wanted to state. At the time, I wasn't a pharmacist. I was learning on the job, as it were. And the pharmacist there, he just made that person feel very welcomed. He didn't think that, oh, we can't understand you. It was very much like, yes, okay, yes, your medicines are here. It was that understanding. So I want to know, what experiences have you had?
The experience I had with pharmacy growing up, with my parents with deaf for their medication, the barrier starts with a GP. So when you go to a GP for the appointment, and at that time we didn't have interpreters, we have to go by trying to lip read the GP. And if you think the GP's writing is not great, their speech is not great because they mumble. So we just go there and smile, and they give us the prescription, and then we go to pharmacy and we hand it in, and then we watch until they shout the name and see if anybody responded. So if they haven't responded, they've got to be mine or my dad's or my mum's. And the mum will probably, your date of birth, your address, take it. So we end up smiling, go, thank you, take it home and think about what the GP said. 3? So is that 3 tablets 3 times a day, or 3 tablets a day? Or is it 1 tablet 3 times a day? Or trying to read the labels and then trying to work out what it means, because some of it's ambiguous, which is the worry, because as growing up, I realised that if the GP prescribed you 1 tablet 3 times a day, and if you take 3 tablets 3 times a day, you overdose on the medication that's been prescribed. I'm wondering, we've been either lucky or unfortunate that has the impact of the side effects. And the other thing, the impact of the medication, the side effects, and it's all in English form text. So we struggle if there's a pain, or you stop doing this if you're feeling dizzy, or we can just see a word that we recognise. Headache's dizzy. Well, I haven't got a headache, dizzy, but I've got a pain. And it's abdominal pains. I know now as adult life, that's what abdominal is, because back then, without interpreting, I wouldn't know what abdominal is. I think it was stomach. The very basic was stomach, heart, lungs, respiratory. What? Lungs. So those are the barriers, and there's communication. And as I got older, and I realised that my dad's got a heart condition, he had medication for it. And then I noticed the pharmacist explained very clear, so I can actually just lip read him. And he said, don't drink grapefruit with this medication. So I asked why? Because the grapefruit's got something in the fruit that clashes with the meds. And that's what I really all explained to Dad. And I started to ask the question, what am I allowed to take with this? What I'm not allowed to take with this? And it really opens my awareness. But I've asked those questions. I don't know about the deaf community, what barriers they have to get the right information.
That's really interesting. There are a few things that you've mentioned. I'm just going to backtrack a bit. You've mentioned that the GP, for example, is one of the barriers. I mean, now it's made me think a lot of the times they're asking for you to phone up to have an appointment. How does that work if that individual is not standing in front of you? How do you get an appointment?
And normally we go to the surgery and look at the reception and say, I need to see the doctor, and things like that. And they put an appointment right down. But the hardest part with COVID, we're not allowed into the doctor. And everything is e-consult. And a lot of BSL users, sometimes their English grammar is not, because how you learn grammar is phonetically, hearing, everything else. We don't have that skill here. We try to read and join the word together. But currently, I think the assumptions of the GP, well, for British, you can lip read, you can read and write. It's an assumption. But the skill we have, which is not a right skill, is we bluff. So it's easy to bluff. Because we are, what? That means more vocabulary. We're going to get lost in the translation, if you know what I mean. So a lot of GPs today fail to provide interpreters because they don't know how to. My question is, I lack capacity. If you think about the Medical Capacity Act, I lack capacity if I don't have an interpreter. So when I have an interpreter there, I've got capacity to respond, no, I don't want this tablet. I don't want this treatment. Yes, I do want this treatment. So I have choices. But without an interpreter, I'm based on trust for the GP. And my choice is taken away. So that to me is a worry, so we don't have a chance to. But to be honest with you, generations and authority we bow to, because we were statement children, special educational needs. So our choices have been taken away by the local authority. They will say, you'll go to that school, you have the tax to go to school. So we have no control, they control us. So today with the educational care plan, I think more children have a choice to respond yes or no and talk to the parent. Back then, I had no control. I was told which school to go to, where to go. And every year we had medical, we had a doctor, education, psychiatrist, and speech therapy doing assessments. With the authority, we end up going, well, we trust you, but we need to break that trust. Not because we don't want to talk to doctors, but we need to have choice. Back then, a lot of deaf people don't have that freedom of choice.
No. Following on from that, communication is such a barrier. I've heard a few times that, oh, that's okay, they can lip read. And I'm thinking, actually, hang on a second. Even myself, who can hear other people, who wasn't born deaf, who's not a user of BSL, I would struggle to lip read, particularly with people who have different accents. And I just think, well, is that really acceptable to say then, particularly from the perspective of a healthcare professional, where we are trying to get critical information across to yourself so you can take your medicine safely? Is it really right for us to assume that people can lip read?
There's a big assumption that deaf people are expert readers. We're not expert. We're only expert in the people we know. Because each of you has got a bank of vocabulary. The more time I meet you, the more time I lip read you. You use the same word over and over again. So I become registered to your pattern. But if I did meet you first time, it's like, trying to work that expression. So it's not just lip reading, it's face expression. Because your question faces your eyebrows. So you go, how are you? I'm okay. So the responsive with your face expression, all the clues help with the communication. Also, think about healthcare during COVID, and now I see a lot of masks. And sometimes I have to remind them and say, I need to lip read you. I've got no interpreter. You can provide the interpreter. Alternatively, can I see your lips? Also, when write things down, don't write essays, just words. But that's not acceptable, but I'm making adjustments for them. They should be making adjustments for me. So it's how but they come up with advisors. I mean, I'm a platelet donator. And during COVID, I couldn't donate because the donation centre hadn't got a clear mark, an advisor for me to access. So I was saying, do you want my blood or my platelet or not? Because you're creating a barrier, not just for me, but other people that need the platelet. There's always a fight to justify it. And sometimes a lot of deaf people, including me sometimes, thinking, I'm warning out saying the same again. All we need is the access. And a lot of them know the access, but I think either they not aware or assumption that we cope. Yes, we cope, but the problem is with coping is when I'm ill, my coping strategy, or if I'm injured, or if I'm mental health, my strategy becomes different. So, and I think they need to understand that lip reading is not fit for all the generations today, how we speak. We are lazy with our pronunciations. Like, 3. Is that 3? Or is it 3? So a lot of people mouth pattern changing over the generation and become lazy. So instead of saying, how are you? Nice to see you. How are you? Nice to see you. And you end up saying, I can't lip read you. So it is, and also the light, the environment, also if you've got anxiety, people around you. So the assumption is always like, write things down. A lot of deaf people go, thank you, walk away. No. What we need is either a visual aid. I mean, what's really good technology, I'm having a conversation with you with subtitles. And if you haven't got a subtitle, I will get an interpreter in this conversation. So it'll be a 3-way conversation. So I'll be signing to interpret their voice over to you. Yep. Or with text. Or you can have software that you can talk. I can see the subtitles. So the technology is now exciting. So I can actually sign to my deaf friends and family through WhatsApp or FaceTime.
You're having to make a lot of adjustments for yourself, but other people aren't making the adjustments to almost meet you halfway is the impression that I'm getting. And it's really making me think. You're saying you're able to use technology now, but then what about people in prison? Now, as mentioned previously, I haven't come across anyone who is deaf in prison who has pharmaceutical needs, but that's making me think, what resources do we have? Do we have an interpreter available? Do I know how to contact that interpreter? We don't have these sorts of softwares in prison given security and things. So what would help make it easier for that individual? Because as we said, there is critical information that I would probably need to let that individual know that this is your medication, this is how you need to take it, how often you need to take it, some of the side effects to be wary of. And it's not just about me giving them the information, but it's also about safety netting them and saying, if you have any concerns, you can get in touch with me. But how are they going to get in touch with me? Those are the sorts of things that I'm thinking now. And I don't know, I mean, you mentioned that you have worked with P.L.O.D. I think it'll be really interesting for the audience to hear your thoughts about that.
I talked about the GP, the starting line for the diagnosis of what treatment and medication and so on. If we go back to the same for prison services. So when a deaf person gets arrested, interviewed, and they go to the custody suites and the sergeant asks questions, their duty is to protect and look after you while you're in custody. Ask if you've got mental health, if you've harmed yourself, and things like that, all those questions. And normally should have an interpreter present to interpret any medication, inhalers, all those sort of things. When they are in remand, they become to remand prison, or they go to court and then suddenly in remand prison. What my experience as P.L.O.D is the police link officer for deaf people. I was a volunteer P.L.O.D to sign, but my role was to link the police to the deaf community about the arrests, about the questioning, about the interpreters. I did that volunteer for 5 years and it was really a busy time. And I often get called into the prison because when they put the deaf person in the prison, just ask questions, they need support. And then one time, the one person that I knew was a drug user and I went to visit and I realised he was a car pupil was fixed. I thought, it's strange. He's used outside of prison. And how did he get the effect in prison? When I was talking to him, I realised that when he arrived in the prison, he went to see the medical centre. He talked to the doctors and he said he uses, and the doctor asked, and he wrote down 60 milligram. So they gave him 60 milligram of morphine.
Just gave it?
Yeah.
Methadone, sorry.
But you were on 15 milligram. So he's taking advantage of that communication. So my question was, the doctor said, that's what's happening. He went, but he told me that you're twisting the information that way and not have it clear. So you're jeopardizing your duty of care by not providing an interpreter. You need to ask all the relevant questions. But the deaf person will look at me, but it's about his safety as well as everybody else's safety. When I visit other prisons where when you're in the medical centre, sometimes you have an issue. You sometimes can't get the doctor on site. It's remote. So you have the screen to remote.
Yeah.
How do we access that? Subtitle for somebody who's hard of hearing and good English, or an interpreter online to communicate. How the doctor support prisoners of their healthcare if they don't get the right information, the right diagnosis? So my question is to prisoners, they think about the journey from the beginning. Well, what medication, any substance misuse, any drug use, cigarette vaping, all those sorts of things. The more information you've got about the person, the more you can support by stop smoking, stop vaping, or whatever support package that you have. And then if they are on the detox, how are you going to support their detox and things like that? And sometimes it just get by. And to be honest, that's not good enough. The effect of the withdrawals and the impact, and that's not fair. The hearing person, you give a leaflet and you explain, and they have a choice to go, take it or leave it. But the deaf person don't have a choice because there's no communication. So really at the beginning, it's important when the prisoner come to the prison, get an interpreter to explain the safety of the prison as well, and your safety, and why your clothes is taken away, and you're given this clothes. This is the wing you're in. This is the button. This is where you eat. All that would be introduction to interpreter. And what I always say to any services, they've already got a barrier of having a disability. And also in prison, there are prisoners for a reason, but you kind of punish them for their crime and punish them for their disability, and that's not fair. That to me is that inequalities. And look about equity here.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because you've mentioned something about the fact that people, if they are not able to hear, how are they going to know whether there's an incident, for example, happening on their wing, that there's a lockdown, so that they're not going to be able to come out, that the regime has been changed? If you think about it, it will impact on their mental health even more, because they're already feeling misunderstood and isolated. And if someone doesn't take the time out to explain all those procedures to them, to let them know, look, for example, there's not going to be any gym today because of this reason, or lunch is going to be served earlier. I've heard so many people say that in prison, they don't have control over anything, to the point that they can't even open their own door. They have to wait for someone to unlock it. Well, if someone can't hear, they must be so anxious in their cell, thinking, who's going to unlock my door and when do I constantly have to keep an eye on it? Because they can't hear someone coming, maybe even on the landing, particularly if they don't have hearing aids. And it's making me really think and question, even as a pharmacy professional, what I can do to help if I'm in that sort of a situation. I mean, from your experiences, what is the advice that you can give to pharmacy? Would you feel that if you went into a pharmacy and you said to them, I'm a user of British Sign Language, or I'm deaf, so if you call out my name, I'm not going to be able to hear. Is that something you have done? Is that something you advocate for people to do? Would you feel that that would actually make them more vulnerable and isolated? What are your thoughts about that? Because I'm just trying to think, what can we do in the pharmacy to support people better?
There's two. One is they've already had the long health conditions like diabetes and the cardio issues, and they have their medication, and they're so used to using that frequently, they self-medicate at home or whatever. Now in the prison, they have to visit the health centre, and normally that much, and there's that talking. And remember, if they're trying to understand you, you turn around and say, how are you feeling today? I don't know what you're saying. So always talk to the deaf person face to face and trying to have that same level. I've seen those hatch. If normally the same eye level is the best. It's just when for example, diabetes start to fluctuate, how do you educate prisoners about being careful about the food you eat and the nutrition? And it's about educating. Anybody got new diagnosis, for example, they were well, met a crime, got to prison, and suddenly prison life impacted mental health. How would they say if they are feeling suicide, self-harming? So it's about recognising. A lot of people say, we recognise that. But with deaf people, we're trying to change our expression. So how do we call out for help? Also personal safety. If you're getting bullied by the prison gang situation, how we cope with that, how we understand. I'm not saying you have to treat the prisoners differently, but it's making them aware of prison life, because I've not experienced, I've seen it. It's quite a change. And also the prison, when they become patients in the mental health settings, again, is about education, explaining what the psychotic medication, what that do to me, and what the effect that could happen if this happened. What do I do? Let you know that I'm feeling a bit. But it's about working with the clinician and the pharmacy to make sure you get the right medication for patients. But how are you going to do it if you can't get that dialogue of information, how they're feeling, they're getting palpitation, they're getting sweats, they're getting nightmares? And how are you going to do that with a BSL person? They would just go, just for a peaceful life.
And that is isolating that individual then, isn't it, really? It's not actually helping them. It's to be honest, it's creating more barriers, if anything. And the other thing that you mentioned is, which I thought about, is this element of confidentiality at the hatch as well, depending on which prison you work in, of course. But if a lot of people are coming to the hatch at the same time, they're queuing one behind the other, that deaf person won't have that privacy as it is, because they're not able to hear, they're not able to judge their surroundings. They're constantly going to be looking over the shoulder, seeing what's going on, that element of safety as well. I mean, I suppose there are situations whereby it's about having a conversation with the wing staff to say to them, look, this individual, please can you bring them at a separate time away from everyone? Those sorts of things. And then we can have a conversation with them without the presence of other people, more of an open, transparent conversation to look at their needs.
What you said there about changing the time, you can offer that. Again, making assumptions, make them different.
Yes.
Make them like you're treating like a prisoner. So I think giving them the choice and saying, we would like time to discuss your medication. Right. We can do it at the same time when there is, the queue to collect your medication, take your medication. Or we can do it at the beginning or the end, where we can get time. Because a lot of the appointments in clinician, we allowed a double appointment because of time, lane and depth. So it's about offering it to the prisoners. They might go, no, you're sending me out. Okay, the offer's there. So you're giving two choices. And we're not used to those choices, but also have a choice. It's so easy to give leaflets. What you could do is like the diabetes management, because I always believe that meds management is managing the meds, but also managing the person to understand why they're taking that meds, what it's doing to the body, how it's impacting the body, how it's preparing it, how it's supporting it. Education is a big part. And I know we talked about education, about learning about your own body, your own medication, your own recovery, because you want to get better. It's about being able to get back into the society. If you can manage their meds, they will learn their meds. When they go out and realise, I've got to take my insulin, I've got to take my heart, blood pressure medication. So you're safeguarding the individual. And I know you're quite impartial with the crime in the prison, but you're actually focusing on their health care. You do health check, pressure, all those sort of things. But please have the education. Maybe they don't, but you're offering it a choice. And also with the emotions where they're in prison, they want to contact family members, their dad, how do they the outside world? In other areas, they use the video link where there is an interpreter present and any discussions, and you have an agreement with the person on the other side, make sure there's no children around, nobody around, you isolate. So there is agreement between the two cameras in those areas. It's workable, manageable. And then online with your doctors that do the remote diagnosis and questioning, subtitles, interpreters, it will make the deaf person feel like you're taking it seriously about their health, but don't feel that the clinician respect their disability. And that's why today the risk of diabetes with deaf people is high. Deaf people are 3 times more likely to get the blood pressure than any culture in our community, because we're not being educated how to reduce it. Mental health is increasing because the resources and measure. So whatever the increase is, it's impacting the deaf community more. So it's about how to rehabilitate, and also in education, if they're going to learn math and English or woodwork, for having a communication support, their interpreter. It's about rehabilitating.
It's very interesting you said that about empowering and educating as well, because a lot of the times in prison, just generally speaking, we tend to find that people don't have the awareness of self-care and self-help in general. For example, if someone is having ulcers in their mouth for whatever reason, one of the basic things that I tend to say is, have you tried saltwater gargles? People think, oh no, I didn't think about that. You can see that regardless whether it's a deaf person or not, that they don't have the awareness and the insight about how to help themselves first, because we all know that it's not easy to get a GP appointment. They could be waiting a month for that. If it's something specific to do with the tooth, like the gum, again, dentist appointment might not be readily available. So I think that's quite important that you're saying about empowering people. And I suppose the way I see it is you've got people who are not deaf sort of here and the people that are deaf here. And it's about really bringing that to the same level, so no one is missing out from the care that they actually need.
Me, the word to my community of deaf people. So it's about exchanging education and awareness. And the last thing about the pathway of the prisoners is if they need operations or treatment of cancer and things like that, and they need to go and get that treatment, and the hospital duty to provide an interpreter. So it's about the prison administration to organise the hospital, our patient liaison service, and say that we have so-and-so arriving. What's happened sometimes, you get handcuffed towards the bed rails, and it's really hard to spring. It's these things that creating barriers, safety for everybody, including the prisoner, is important, I get. But it's about being visible, saying, if you this, we have to handcuff you again. Okay, it's all about education. It's for your benefit to communicate, but if you're reacting, we have to restrain you. And then obviously we interpret it in hospital and explain the post-care, and then first the pharmacy, those medications help you to heal. So it's a reinforced learning. And hopefully when the prisoner leaves back into the community, have some faith that the prison has looked after my mental well-being, physical well-being, and helped me to grow and rehabilitate myself back in society as a new person. Otherwise, if the society is not helping them, the prison not helping them, what hope they have?
Do you think it'd be useful to have an interpreter at that stage of someone being released?
Go either to the hospital and the scary environment, and you're mixing with probably the wrong crowd, but it's about releasing the community where they probably go to probation service. And again, it's about letting probation service that this person's deaf, need BSL interpreter when they come and visit, or they're on different license where they can have a day release and come back. It's about explaining the risk. If you don't come back, if you're not doing the curfew and so on, you'll be sent back to prison. There's no point if you don't have an interpreter to explain it, and they did all this, they come back and say, well, I didn't know. You haven't told me. So who's fault in that? So it's important to be clear in that message. So the deaf person is clear. So for the prison service to say, we've explained it to you with the interpreter, you have no excuse. So it's about supporting the prison as well as the prisoner and the society as well. And also to protect the individual about certain places that they can't go. For example, previous areas, there could be an injunction you're not allowed there, or if they've got previous sex offence issues, you can't be in that area. So it's all about education and awareness. A lot of time when you educate, they go, I understand. If they don't explain, they're naturally going to gravitate towards crime, and they go back and then keep going back, and then it's because of lack of education. I say that not just for the deaf people. I think people with different languages might have that barrier. People from the country, people with learning disability, speech impediment, English, they can't read and write. It's about giving people a chance to regain themselves and give them a second chance, third chance.
And just one last question from me is, if I wanted an interpreter, I mean, obviously I'd have to check my own policies, but how readily could we find an interpreter to come into prison? Do you know of any organisation or any charity or anyone who works directly with the prison? How does that work?
In the criminal justice system in the area, like the courts and the police, and ask what interpreters that service they use, because you need interpreters to understand about prison jargons and the process. Not just anybody comes in, because you've got to think about your personal safety, what happens, something happened, and have to with them. If the key holder will go with them and make sure they support and look after the interpreters, because it could be that that person have an episode and attack the interpreter. So It's all about educating the interpreters, do's and don'ts, also on the criminal justice system, to then understand the court. And if a deaf person discloses something that they feel like suicidal, they have a duty to say it. And it's about contact. That's what they contact me with the police and said, and they said, Paul, you're needed. One of yours in there, one of mine. No, a deaf person. I had once the other person in the custody suite that really kicked off. They called me at 3 in the morning, so I turned up. He was upset because he was food, he was tea. The minute they opened the door, they had the right gear on. Paul, worried about your safety, just open the door. The minute they the door, and I said, what's the problem? He went, I don't know, he wants a cup of tea, he wants food. Oh, and he calmed down, sit down. I said, they'll bring you tea and food. So an hour kicking off, banging the doors and everything else. There's the communication barrier. But they thought he was aggressive. Probably need to, just communication. The key, and explain after. The officer said sorry, the detention officer said sorry. And I said, that's fine, learn from that experience. And the next time it happens, then you realise, even showing pictures of cup, visual language, food, do it. Yeah. You're trying, we can see you're trying. So what I ask for the prison services, open that curiosity. And if that person here, how would they feel? Just have that conversation among yourself. If you have a deaf prisoner arriving today, what resources have you got to support that prisoner and your staff? Because the staff might go, how do I communicate with him? But don't be fooled, because deaf people, like other hearing people, are very clever to manipulate. So just be clear that, they need this. No, you need to think back. They're a prisoner, they're here for a reason. We can make adjustments within reasons. That's what you need to be clear, and talk to the governors, and they can talk to you, and how I'm happy to support that, because it's supporting the deaf community having the right treatment in prison.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. You've given myself and the wider audience a lot of food for thought, and how we can support the deaf community better.